Hello, and thank you very much for accepting this interview with us. Can you tell us, why do you think that in these days, when we have food, we have, I don't know, homes, we have everything, people are having more mental health issues than in other times?
Well, Jesus said it best. He said, man does not live by bread alone. So that we have physical needs, and it's very important that they be met, but we also have emotional and spiritual needs. And today's society is pretty good at meeting people's need for food and shelter, although for many people that's not even true. In the Western world, in Britain when I was just there, and Canada, the US, there's a lot of poverty, a lot of people struggling to bring food to the table and to have decent places to live. But by and large, in the Western world, the physical issues are taken care of. But people also have emotional needs, and they're just as important. Emotional needs for a sense of meaning, for a purpose in their lives, for having work that they can connect with, for being connected with other people. There's an increasing epidemic of loneliness in the Western world. In Britain, I don't know what it's like in Romania, but people are more and more lonely. In Britain, they had to appoint a minister of loneliness. Now, loneliness is as much of a risk factor for disease as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, because our biology is not separable from our emotional nature, and when emotional needs are not met, our biology suffers too. So what I'm saying about the modern world is that it does not meet people's emotional needs. It doesn't meet children's emotional needs for connection, belonging, acceptance, and it doesn't meet adults' emotional needs for purpose and meaning and connection and being related to something bigger than just the individual. So the modern world is very poor at meeting those needs. And it also puts a lot of stress on people. And stress is not good for mental health.
But why do you think we are more lonely when we have so many ways to communicate, to be close to each other, to see each other, to talk to each other? What's missing now?
Well, when you look at how human beings evolved, like how did, if you want to study a zebra, where would you study the zebra? In a zoo, or
in the jungle, yeah.
In its natural environment? Well, human beings evolved for millions of years, for hundreds of thousands of years, in small hunter-gatherer groups where everybody knew everybody, the whole group moved together, the children were always with the adults, real deep sense of community. And we lived that way until very recently. So even our own species, Homo sapiens, if our existence is 150,000 or 200,000 years old, then not being in those small groups out there in nature is only about 12,000, 15,000 years old. So that's like, if we've existed for an hour, then we've been living away from nature and each other only for the last 5 minutes. And increasingly, this society separates people. Like, I'll give you a simple example. Some big store comes into a town. I don't know, we have Walmart or Costco in Romania, but in North America, these big mega stores. Well, when the mega stores open, people all of a sudden don't walk to where they shop and they don't see each other in the street. They drive in their cars. When they get to their store, they are served by strangers. In the old days, you'd walk down to the neighborhood store, the hardware store, the grocery store, the bakery, the car mechanic, and you'd talk to people that you knew. That's one factor. Now today, that's less and less the case. When you go to a gas station these days, There used to be people there that you would talk to, and they would, now you just talk to a machine. And it's true that we have the internet, but the internet is a very false form of communication. It can be very good, very important, but also people, Facebook, I mean, even look at the word Facebook. We put on a face, but not ourselves. We put on an image. So one image is talking to another image, but where's the real person? And where's the real relationship? So what I'm saying is that there's an artificiality to modern life that takes away from our authentic connection with other human beings.
You talk a lot and you wrote a lot about the relationships between parents and children and how we lose this connection because we move, we live in different cities, different countries, different continents.
Yeah.
But also when we are together, it's different than it was.
Well, when we're together, very often, what are we doing together? We're watching a screen together. We're not looking at each other. I don't know what it's like here in Romania, but in North America, the family meal, which used to be such an important, wasn't just about eating, it was about communicating, relating to each other, connecting, telling stories. That's gone. And if you look at kids, they spend a lot more time with machines than with real human beings. And that has an effect on their brains.
Also, the diet practitioners talk about the family meal that we used to took together, and they said that missing this, it's a cause for increasing obesity and things like this.
It is what?
It's a cause for increasing obesity because we don't eat for eating and for talking. We eat in front of the screen and so and so and so.
Well, yes. It's a very negative influence.
How can you think that we can go back to the good practice of parenting, let's say?
Well, first of all, we have to begin with, not with what do we want the child to become, but what are the child's needs. If you were a gardener and your flowers weren't growing the way you wanted them to, what questions would you ask yourself? You would ask yourself, what needs does this flower have for nutrition, for soil, for mineral, for sunshine, for water? Well, this society, modern society, doesn't begin with the question, what do children need for healthy development? It begins with the question, how do we raise children to fit them into society? But many of the things we do to train kids to fit in with the expectations of society actually undermine a healthy development. So when we focus on behaviors rather than the emotional needs of the child, we're actually interfering with the child's capacity to develop in a healthy way. And this happens at homes, it happens in the schools, it happens with the babies already. We're already telling mothers and fathers not to pick up their babies when they're crying so that they can sleep.
Sleep training, yeah.
So sleep training. Well, what baby needs to be trained how to sleep? Babies don't know how to sleep. What they don't know how to sleep is according to the schedule that we want them to sleep with. But the baby's need is to be picked up when they're crying. If we don't do that, their brain gets flooded with stress hormones. That interferes with their brain development because that desire to be picked up is an emotional need that's just as important as physical needs. Here in Romania, when there were those terrible orphanages under the Ceausescu regime, those children, there wasn't enough staff to look after them. So they got fed and they got clothed, but they had no emotional relationships. And they weren't picked up when they were crying.
Yeah, and they were let cry for hours and hours and hours.
And we see now the result in mental health issues, in addictions, in attention deficit disorder, depression, anxiety, relationship problems, behavior problems. I mean, you had an experiment in this country, an extreme experiment, a terrible one, of what I'm talking about, but in a less extreme way. The same thing is happening. We're more and more neglecting our kids' emotional needs. We don't have time for them. We don't pick them up when they cry. We're told to let them, train them how to sleep. We're told, parents are told when a child is angry, tell them to go away. You know, time out, they call it in English.
And don't cry.
Sorry?
And don't cry.
And don't cry about it either.
Yeah.
And what's the message? The message is, your emotions are not acceptable to me, and you are only acceptable to me if you meet my conditions. But the child has this desperate, irreducible need for unconditional loving acceptance. Whether they're angry or sad or happy or lively, they need to be accepted for who they are. When we deny that, we're actually denying their emotional needs. That interferes with their development.
But why we deny that? Why it becomes so complicated to raise a child?
Because, for one thing, we get disconnected from our own parenting instincts. Like, for example, when I talk to parents who sleep train their kids, I ask them, what does it feel like to you when your child is crying, when your baby is crying, and you're not picking her up? They say, it breaks my heart. Well, you try and tell a mother monkey to ignore the baby's crying, or a mother cat, or a mother rat. Never. You know, so that for one thing, we get disconnected from our own instincts. Secondly, we're very stressed. The economic competition, all the cultural stress, the harassed nature of modern life, we're very stressed. And when we're stressed, our children absorb our stresses. They pick up on them, and they think it's their fault. And also, when we're stressed, it's been shown in studies that when parents are stressed, they're not as patient with their kids. They're not as loving. Not because they don't love their kids, but because when they're stressed, they can't be as loving as they would want to be. So children don't get the emotional nourishment that they need. And then there's, as I was saying earlier, a lot of experts, so-called experts, one of them is speaking at the conference tomorrow that I'm speaking at, who advise parents to suppress the child's emotions. Well, when parents do that, they're hurting the child.
How can we regain this balance? Because stress will not disappear.
No.
The world would go like this.
No, stress will not disappear. No, but at least if we're aware of it, we can begin to do something about it. We can begin to look at ourselves so we're not passing it on to our kids. So, like, here's the thing. As I'm sitting here talking to you, I know you're not worried that I'm going to float off to the ceiling. You're not worried about it because you know that there's gravity. And gravity will keep me seated here. Now, gravity is an attachment force. It pulls two bodies together. Now, but if I landed on the moon all of a sudden, if I was up in the moon, I would float off because the gravitational force on the moon is much less than on Earth. I'd have to compensate for it. I'd have to be aware of what I've lost, put on heavy boots. Now what's happened is that attachment, that relationship between parent and child, or between two people, is also an attachment force. It pulls two bodies together. But we've landed on the moon in this culture, and we haven't compensated for it. So we may not be able to go back to be hunter-gatherers, nor would we want to, in living in small groups. But we need to realize what we've lost. And we have to start talking about how to compensate for it. In our schools, for example, like if you look at the human brain, it begins to develop in the womb, which means that already the emotional states of the mother are affecting the brain of the child. Let's make sure that pregnant women get lots of support, emotional support. Young parents need lots of support. But the brain starts developing before birth, and it continues into adulthood. That means that all the while the kids are going to school, their brains are developing. Now, do the schools even know that? Do the school system in any country ask themselves, what are the needs for the healthy development of the child's brain? No, we're focused on teaching them
This and this and this.
This and that, this mathematical fact, this historical fact. What if the schools understood what it takes for the child? You know what it takes for the child's brain to develop? Absolutely emotional safety, and freedom to be curious, and play, lots of play. When kids get that, they learn spontaneously, naturally, and much better. Schools don't get it. They think our job is to stuff our kids full of knowledge. As a result, we're undermining their emotional development and their brain development. It's really very simple. But what if we just understood this? And teachers, by the way, who get it, they have much better success. The teachers who connect with the kids emotionally, who make it fun, who make it playful.
And who understand play, yeah.
Yeah, those kids learn. And it's not that difficult.
You said in one of your books that hunger for drugs is hunger for love.
Well, let's take heroin. So heroin is an opiate. It comes from Afghanistan and from a poppy plant, and people get very addicted to it. Well, why do they get addicted? Well, why does heroin work in the human brain? Because it resembles the natural chemical in our own brains. And those natural chemicals are called endorphins. Endorphin means endogenous internal morphine-like substance. We have them. Plants have them. Animals have them. Why do we have them? What do they do in the human brain? Number one, pain relief. Physical and emotional pain relief. Number two, they help to make possible experiences of joy and happiness. And number three, they help make possible love. So between a mother and an infant, when they're looking into each other and they're just locked into this attuned interaction, they both have endorphins flowing in their brains. Now, people who are deprived of that kind of loving experience early in childhood, people who are hurt in childhood, so they have a lot of pain, people who don't experience joy and happiness, you give them heroin, now they feel normal. So the addiction is not this disease that they have. The addiction is their attempt to get the love they didn't get. And they told me that when I worked with hardcore drug addicts in Vancouver, Canada, they would always tell me, I said, what does it do for you? They said, it's like a warm, soft hug. Or they said, it's like mother, you're 3 years old and you're sick and you're shivering, and your mother wraps you in a warm blanket, puts you on her lap and gives you warm chicken soup. That's what the heroin is like. That's what they're all looking for. In fact, not just heroin addiction, all addictions. In Romania, alcoholism is a big problem. In my home country, my birth country of Hungary, alcoholism is a big problem. I think there's a competition between the two countries about who's
but also here in Romania, grandma's chicken soup, it's good for everything. When you are scared, when you are sick, when you are everything.
Well, it's true though. But with the alcohol is a painkiller. The more pain people have, it's a stress reliever. The more pain and stress people have, the more they're going to drink alcohol. So the question is not why the alcohol, but why the stress and why the pain. And for that, you have to look at people's childhoods and you have to look at their lives.
One of your books, it's about the way our body reflects this lack of love, maybe, about the physical pain from emotional sufferance.
Well, as I was
Emotion
saying,
hurts, that's the idea, maybe.
Well, as I was saying, the child has this deep need to be accepted for who they are. Now, if I depend on you, because you're my caregiver and you're my nurturer and you're my everything, and you don't accept me the way I am, you want me to be different. You want me to be quiet or more loud. You want me to be good, which means never to get upset. If I need you to accept me no matter what, I will then make myself into what you want me to be. I will suppress my anger. I will be very nice. I'll be very good at the cost of separating from myself, at the cost of stressing myself. So when children are not fully accepted for who they are, they have to adjust themselves to the environment, and those adjustments actually, because the mind and the body can't be separated, when I am suppressing my emotions or denying my needs, I'm also affecting my physiology, my immune system, my hormonal apparatus, my nervous system, my intestines, my heart. So the more hurt children are in childhood, or the more their needs are denied, the more likely they are to have physical illness as adults. So
that's why we get sick?
Sorry?
That's why we get sick?
Well, I think, I don't want to say that there's only one reason we get sick, but it's a powerful reason why we get sick. And for example, women, the so-called autoimmune diseases in which the immune system attacks the body, like rheumatoid arthritis, like multiple sclerosis, and other diseases like that, 80% of them are women with these diseases. In the 1930s, the gender ratio between men and women for multiple sclerosis was 1:1. Now it's 3.5 women to every man. But what's going on? It has to do with the extra stress on women in this society. And I know people here in Romania who work with multiple sclerosis. Once people realize that the disease is driven by stress and by the stress of trying to be who you're not, because that's how you were trained as a child. And if you turn that around, your disease gets better. So, yeah, I'm not saying every illness is caused by that, but you know, there's hardly any illness that you can separate from the social and emotional environment. If you look at COVID, again, I don't know the local statistics, but in Britain or in Canada or the United States, those that were poor or people of color, they were much more likely to get COVID because they were more stressed, and so that their immune system was less resistant.
Yeah, but there, in Britain, maybe it's a bigger difference between the poor and the medium class. Here in Romania, it's not so. It's,
I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand. All I'm saying that it's an example of how,
yeah, I know.
even when it comes to a very clear source of a disease like a virus, even then you can't separate the person's resistance from their emotional environment.
But you cannot be not stressed in this society. It's impossible. No. It's the traffic, it's, I don't know, the after hours, it's everything that's stressful in a way.
Yeah.
You have to work, you have to raise the kids, you have to, I don't know.
Yeah, it's true. But for one thing, to take me as an example, so I'm a medical doctor, at least I used to work as a medical, I don't, not for the last 11 years, but that's what I did for 32 years. I was a workaholic. I worked all the time and I never said no. So it doesn't matter how many babies I was delivering, if a woman wanted to come to me and said, would you, I'd say yes. Or it doesn't matter how many families I had in my practice, if somebody wanted to join my practice, I would say yes. I couldn't say no. Now, why couldn't I say no? Because the work wasn't just work. The work was also who I thought I was. And the message I got, due to my own history as an infant, is that I wasn't wanted. Well, if you're not wanted, become a medical doctor. No, they're going to want you all the time. That means you never say no. It wasn't the work that was so stressful, it was my relationship to it. I could have been a doctor, do a good job, but not take on all the stress of trying to prove something. So it's not just the work that's stressful, it's a relationship to the work that creates the stress. When I just finished writing my new book, which will be published here, I think this year. At some point I was having panic attacks. And this is me at age 76. having panic attacks and my blood pressure was going up. Not because I was writing the book, but because I was making it mean so much. That if this book fails, then I'm a failure. That maybe this time I can't do it. Maybe this time the whole world will see how incompetent I am. In other words, the stories that I told myself created all the stress. When I dropped all that, I just wrote the book. So it's not just the work, it's also how we relate to it. It's not just driving home in traffic that's stressful. When you're driving home in traffic, you could listen to a nice book. You could listen to nice music. You could be thinking. It's stressful if we're saying, it shouldn't be this way. Why is it this way? This is terrible. In other words, a lot of the stresses that we experience isn't just because of what happens. It's also about our attitude towards it.
So it's about how we deal with
things.
with
Yeah.
it, yeah.
Yeah,
So
no.
that's why some people deal it better.
Absolutely. And the people who get very frustrated very easily, it usually means that their needs were not met in childhood and that they have a deep frustration. And so anything that happens, that frustration gets triggered. So there's a lot that people can do. Now, if you're doing a job that you don't like, that doesn't represent who you are, that's going to be stressful. And some people don't have a choice. Just economically, they don't have a choice. But a lot of people are just doing it because they think they have to, because they don't have the freedom to think independently. So, yeah, it's a stressful life, but there's a lot that we can do. People can also not take their work home. They can forget about it when they go home. People can spend time with their families. They can meditate. They can. I have to swim every day. If I don't, my nervous system doesn't like it. So people can take care of themselves. And also, of course, people can talk about it. People can get therapy. People can get help to understand themselves better. So we're not total victims. We don't have to be.
But can we talk about good addictions?
No.
Sports, I don't know.
No,
if you run
no.
every day?
No, you can't. What you're talking about are good habits.
Okay.
But they're not good addictions. Here's the thing about addiction. How do we define an addiction? An addiction is manifested in any behavior that a person finds temporary pleasure or relief in and therefore craves, but then suffers negative consequences. I said any behavior. So that could be alcohol, tobacco, heroin, cocaine, work, sex, gambling, bulimia, shopping, extreme sports, internet, gaming, pornography, anything. The issue isn't the behavior. The issue could also be work. The issue isn't the behavior, the issue is the internal relationship to it. If there's temporary relief and pleasure and craving and negative consequences, and you can't give it up, how can you talk about a good addiction? What good addiction will cause you harm? So now, if you walk every day and you love it, but you don't have any harm from it, that's not an addiction.
Okay.
It's just a good habit. If you love music and you listen to it a lot, but there's no harm to it, you're not depriving yourself or your family of anything important. It's just a passion that you have. That's a good habit. That's not an addiction. Addiction, you know what the word addiction comes from? It comes from the word for slavery. There's no good slavery.
So, is there a way to use, good habits, to use the world today in a good way for you and for your family and for everybody's life, let's say?
Well, it's a good question because everything can be good or bad depending on how we use it. So take the internet. It can be, when I was writing this book, I was so glad for the internet because all the research that I didn't have to go to libraries, or when people live, if the grandparents live in Cluj, but the children and the grandchildren live in Bucharest, what a wonderful thing Zoom is, the internet.
Yes.
You know?
Exactly.
Effective, and it keeps people together. It's a wonderful way to connect. But that same computer can become addictive. The same computer can hook children into very unhealthy interactions with each other, with this blaming and shaming and bullying and
Yeah, because they are
insulting.
covered with cameras and everything. I don't have to face the other, and
That's
things
right.
are more easier there.
Well, that's right. And that's what I'm saying. So here you have something that could be very, very good, or it could be very, very bad, depending on who's using it and how they're using it. So yeah, there's many things in this world that are very positive if we use them properly. The technology we have, the science that we have, the medical knowledge that we have. By the way, I don't think we're using the medical knowledge nearly as well as we should. I think there's a lot of, it's a whole other subject, but there's a lot that's very positive. The question is, under the pressures of modern life and under the stresses, are we doing the best job of using what we have?
How can we learn to go back to the children? How can we teach children to use internet and all of this in a good way for them?
Well, for one thing, are you a parent? Do you have kids?
Yes,
Okay. How old are your kids?
12, 13.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a very outrageous question.
Yes,
Would you give them whiskey at age 3?
no, of course,
Would you advise them to get into sexual behavior at age 5?
no.
Why not?
I don't think they are developed enough to understand what they are doing.
Exactly. Same with the internet. Same with computers. But we're giving little babies these machines that they get addicted to. So what I'm saying is that the first question about the internet is it should not be used by people who are not mature enough to understand what to do with it. Our children get these machines and these computers and these gadgets way too early. It damages their brains. I'm not making that up. There are
No.
studies that show that the cortex, the cerebral cortex doesn't develop as well for kids that are on the internet a lot. But if we wouldn't give them whiskey or sex before they're ready for it, why do we give them digital technology before they're ready for it? And why do the companies deliberately design games and devices to get kids addicted to those devices? You know, so that's what I'm saying.
So when we can think that they are ready?
When they don't, when first of all, when your relationship as a parent with them is so strong and they trust you so much that they listen to your guidance. That when you say enough, it's enough. Okay?
With teenagers, when you say enough, they don't hear.
Well,
It's easier.
teenagers, there's a natural desire to be independent.
Yeah.
But if the relationship is good, they will listen to your advice. They will. They will look to you. If they're not looking to you, we need to think about what happened to the relationship. But I'm talking about young kids, you know, so that when you ask me, well, how come you use the internet well? First of all, let's make sure that the people that use it are mature enough to use it, number one. Number two, what was it designed for? It was called the information highway. It was designed originally for scientists to exchange information in an efficient manner. It's beautiful for that reason, for that purpose. I mean, as I said, I really appreciate it personally. But it wasn't designed for people to be sitting in front of a screen with a blank look on their face, jumping from one thing to another. It was designed for information, for communication. I myself am very prone to I click on the YouTube and then just mindlessly go from one, you know, and then an hour later, it's 11 o'clock at night. What am I doing? I should be in bed reading a book.
Where do you see the world in 15 years, let's say? Because things are moving so fast that I won't ask in 50 years.
Well, for one thing, I think at my age, Are you watching the world from below, as they say, you know? You never know. I think it's getting worse. I mean, I'm not a prophet.
Of course.
Nobody is a prophet in that sense. Nobody can tell the future. But if I look at the trends today, if I project the present trends into the future, it's more alienation, it's more mental health issues. In the Western world, it's more inequality. I was just in Britain. There was an article just yesterday, a new report, that showed that the rate of childhood diabetes has gone up 50% in Britain. It's been going up for years and years.
And that's caused by stress.
It's stress,
Yeah.
which makes people eat more, so they get overweight. And they also eat junk foods because they're temporary, they're like alcohol, they're temporary stress relievers. So the result of the increasing stress is children are getting diseases that they never used to get. Heart diseases and diabetes and so on in high rates. I don't see that getting better. Not under present conditions. I see this getting more. And you know, if you look at what stresses people, it's uncertainty, lack of information, loss of control. Those are the triggers for stress. I don't know what's happening economically here, but in North America, people are more insecure economically. Inflation is going up. Inflation is going up 10% in Britain this year.
Here also, and we have the Ukraine war nearby, and a lot of stressors, let's say.
So there's the stress of economic survival amidst all this wealth. Look at all the wealth that we have. And people are still insecure. And then there's the whole climate insecurity that young people are very aware, are very aware of. So as insecurity grows, unless we find some solutions for these problems, people's stresses are going to increase. So I think they're going to be more ill and more mentally unbalanced. That's what I see happening. I hope I'm wrong. But if you ask me today, what trends am I seeing today? I don't know the future, but I can see what's happening today, and I can see where it's going.
Can we do something as persons, not as society, as to be better for each of us?
Yeah, we have to wake up. We just have to see what's going on. I mean, most of us assume that this is just the way it has to be. You know, and look, here in Eastern Europe, we know what happened. For a long time, terrible things happened. People didn't like it, but they thought it's just the way it had to be. There's nothing they could do about it. At some point, it had to fall apart, didn't it? Like nothing that's unsustainable can continue forever. But people have to wake up. So we have to wake up to our own issues, to our own stresses, to our own traumas, and we have to wake up to the social environment that's not very good for human beings.
Maybe take care more of our relationships?
Well, connecting with other people is a good beginning. Yeah, and it does begin at home. Like a relationship with like for me, my relationship with my wife has been my most important school, if I can put it that way. I've learned there more than anywhere else out there in the world. So our relationship with our loved ones, our children, our parents, our friends, our communities, it has to begin on that level. But you know what? I don't have a magic wand. I don't have sort of...
Nobody has.
Sorry?
Nobody has.
No, yeah. So I don't know that I have really satisfactory answer for you. I'm a physician. I'm a diagnostician. I'm looking at people. Here's the problem, and we've got so far away from our needs and our nature as human beings. How can we talk about getting back? That's what I do.
But you talk about the relation with your wife. We are not in the moment where we invest in these relations. You know, if something went wrong, we leave.
Yeah. Well, that's one. Yeah, and then we get into another one, and then when that goes wrong, then we
like
leave
we
that
change
one.
TVs or I don't know, refrigerators.
Yeah, that's right. Well, here's the thing. When you get into a relationship, it's always going to be with a person who's got just as many problems as you do. If they had fewer problems, they would have nothing to do with you. If you had fewer problems, you would have nothing to do with them. That means whoever you hook up with, connect with, they're going to have the same number of problems rooted in their own childhood and lifetime experience. Now that could be a beautiful thing. If two people can say to each other, we're two imperfect human beings, there's a lot of pain and trauma that we carry, but we can use this relationship not to blame each other for our problems, but to help each other to grow together. That can be very good. If we just blame each other for our problems, we'll never get anywhere. Or if one partner is willing to grow, but the other is not, there's nothing you can do. Then, that relationship can't survive.
So we need to go together.
You need to grow together or you're going to grow apart. It's that simple.
Thank you very much for this discussion and it's been a real pleasure. Aceasta a fost, doamnelor și domnilor, ediția specială a emisiunii Dar și Har. O să ne revedem și vinerea